Asteroid GR774 disappeared at 3:42 in the morning, and I know it was my fault. It didn't disappear like an object moving beyond scanner range, didn't disappear like signal interference or sensor failure or cataloging error. It disappeared as if it had never existed. 1 second it was there, a rocky body 230 meters in diameter orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, and the next second, there was nothing. No gravitational trace, no residual dust, not the slightest perturbation in the orbital fabric of neighboring bodies. Just void. And the absurd, irrational, impossible to ignore certainty that I caused this. My name is Danilo Ferraz. I'm 46 years old, 18 of them dedicated to asteroid belt cartography for Meridian Deep Space Survey. I'm the type of professional people forget exists because nobody thinks about the cartographer. Nobody celebrates the guy who spends months cataloging floating rocks in the dark, assigning alphanumeric designations to pieces of cosmic debris nobody will ever visit. But someone has to do this. Someone has to know what's out there, where it is, and where it's going. I'm that someone. Or at least I was. Because something changed. Something is profoundly wrong with the belt, with my instruments, or with me. It all started 11 days ago. Maybe 12, actually, because the log says 11, but I have this strange impression I lost a day somewhere, as if I'd slept for 36 hours without realizing. The mapping station is small enough that I should notice something like that, but at the same time large enough for silence to swallow time whole if you don't pay attention. GR774 was the first to disappear. I was doing standard scanning of Delta Zone, that millimetric fine-tooth comb that takes forever, but is the heart of the work. You sweep the area, register each body, calculate orbit, composition, estimated mass, collision risk, and move to the next. It's repetition, it's routine, it's the type of work that hypnotizes the mind of whoever does it. I remember locking the scan on GR774. I remember seeing the data filling the screen slowly. Composition predominantly silicates with iron-nickel veins. Slow rotation, stable orbit. Nothing that caught attention. I saved the record, marked it as cataloged, and moved to the next body, as I do hundreds of times per day. When I came back to check the complete sector the next morning, GR774 simply wasn't there anymore. I thought it was my error, naturally. I redid the scan 3 times in a row, and all 3 times the result was the same. Nothing. The space where that asteroid should be was just empty darkness. I verified the saved data, and the record existed, intact, with all the parameters I had noted the night before. But the asteroid corresponding to that data simply no longer existed in real space, as if I had cataloged a ghost. I swallowed the discomfort and moved forward, because cartographers deal with anomalies all the time. It's part of the job. You mark the event, report to base, and let the analysis team solve the mystery later. I wasn't here to solve mysteries, I was here to map. But then GR781 disappeared too. Then GR789. Then an entire cluster. GR790 through 794. 5 bodies at once. All in the same scanning session, as if darkness had swallowed that piece of the belt in one bite. And the pattern was impossible to ignore. Each asteroid I scanned, that I cataloged and saved in records, vanished. Sometimes it took hours. Sometimes it was a matter of minutes. But the result was always, invariably, the same. I looked. I recorded. And the universe erased what I had just seen, as if the act of observing was the trigger of destruction. As if I was the problem. I contacted Meridian through emergency channel. The response took 14 hours, which is perfectly normal considering the distance between us. But this time it seemed like an eternity. I explained the situation in the most technical and sober way I could. Systematic disappearance of cataloged bodies. consistent pattern linked to scanning process. Request for external verification of affected sectors. The response I received back came short, professional, and with a tone that bothered me without me being able to explain why. It was almost too kind. Danilo, your records are being monitored and are within expected parameters. Continue mapping normally. Support team monitoring within expected parameters. Asteroids were disappearing from space, rocky bodies hundreds of meters across dissolving into nothing. And someone on the other side of that transmission was telling me this was within expected parameters. I reread the message 5 times trying to find something hidden behind those words. Some urgency disguised as calm, some instruction encoded in formality. But I found nothing. Just that strange kindness, that careful tone of someone talking to a scared child in the dark who doesn't want to make things worse. Continue mapping normally. So I continued. In the next 3 sessions, I lost 32 more asteroids. 32 bodies that existed when I started work, and that simply stopped existing after my scanners passed over them. I started keeping a parallel list, handwritten in a physical notebook I kept under my pillow because I no longer entirely trusted the station's digital systems. Each name noted, each designation, each orbital position recorded with firm handwriting on paper, and each time I verified the corresponding sector after a few hours, empty. The notes in the notebook were all that remained of those bodies, the only proof they had existed at some point, the only proof I wasn't going crazy. And that's when, hunched over that notebook in the middle of the night, I started noticing patterns, not in the disappearances themselves, but in the positions they left behind. When I plotted all lost asteroids on a 3-dimensional map, the gaps that remained in the belt weren't random. There was geometry there, subtle, almost imperceptible if you looked sector by sector, but undeniable, impossible to deny. When you took a step back and saw everything at once, the empty spaces formed lines. The lines curved into arcs, and the arcs met in shapes that couldn't be accidental. They were symbols. I spent 17 hours straight trying to understand what I was seeing. I rotated the map at every possible angle, projected in 2 dimensions, overlaid reference grids, tried every coordinate system I knew. And when I finally found the right projection axis, when the curves aligned and the negative spaces revealed their complete form on the screen before me, they were deliberate symbols, written in the void between the remaining asteroids, as if someone had ripped pieces from the entire belt to carve a message into the flesh of space. Or as if I was ripping. I didn't recognize the language, and look, I'm not a linguist. But after 18 years mapping objects in deep space, you end up seeing a lot in humanity's databases. Hieroglyphs, cuneiform, kanji, Cyrillic. Everything our species has used to mark presence in the cosmos eventually appears as cataloging reference. But this wasn't anything I'd seen before. The symbols had an organicity that disturbed me in a way I couldn't rationalize. They seemed to have grown more than been written, as if they were something alive that had sprouted there. Curves that repeated at different scales, imperfect fractals, like veins in organic tissue that pulses. And there was clear progression in them, a sequence that suggested direction, that suggested beginning and end, as if they were made to be read in a specific order, by someone who knew how to look. A message. Someone, or something I couldn't even begin to imagine, was using the asteroid belt as a blank page. And I, by mapping the bodies and observing their disappearance, was revealing what had already been written there all along. Or maybe worse than that. Maybe I was writing without knowing my hand held the pen. That idea gave me a chill no station heating system would be able to resolve. I sent another message to Meridian. This time I set protocol aside, set formality aside, set everything aside. I sent images of the patterns, 3-dimensional projections, the symbols I had isolated. I wrote that there was something in the data that surpassed any catalogable anomaly, that this wasn't a natural phenomenon, that I needed someone to help me understand what was happening before the entire belt disappeared. The response this time took 22 hours. Danilo, we understand your concern. The patterns you identified are very interesting, and our team is analyzing everything very carefully. In the meantime, we suggest you continue mapping normally. Your work is extremely valuable to all of us. Dr. Renata is available if you want to talk. Dr. Renata, Meridian's onboard psychologist, the professional who does remote monitoring of crew on prolonged solo missions, to ensure isolation isn't corroding anyone from inside. They thought I was losing my mind. The anger I felt lasted little. Maybe 2 hours at most, before being replaced by something much more useful and much more dangerous. Obsession. If Meridian wasn't going to take seriously what I was seeing, then I would decode that message myself. 18 years of career dedicated to this. Millions of bodies cataloged over almost 2 decades. I knew patterns better than any algorithm they'd programmed. If there was a message written in the spaces between asteroids, I would read every syllable of it. I stopped sleeping properly from that moment. Mapping sessions transformed into frantic decoding sessions. I kept scanning the belt, asteroids kept disappearing one after another, and each new void that opened added one more stroke to the symbols on screen. It was like watching someone write a letter in real time before my eyes. Except the ink of that letter was made of absence, of everything that was no longer there. After 4 days sleeping no more than 2 hours straight, I had my first real breakthrough. I discovered the symbols weren't unique, they repeated. Not like letters of conventional alphabet, but like variations on a central theme. The same base pattern appeared several times with subtle modifications at each repetition, as if each time it returned it brought a new layer of meaning with it. I started assigning correspondence values. I still didn't know what the symbols actually meant, but I could map the internal relationships between them. Frequency of appearance, relative position on map, degree of shape complexity. And slowly, over hours that seemed to stretch like rubber, a structure emerged from the data. It wasn't an alien language like I expected. It was something simpler than that. More familiar, in a way that bothered me without me understanding why. The simplest symbols always appeared first. The more complex ones came later, as if following a natural order of progression. And the most complex of all, those that required dozens of asteroids removed for their outlines to form in void. These were at the map's edges, in areas I hadn't scanned yet, as if the message was waiting there for me, patiently, since before I arrived, as if it knew I would find it. On the 8th day, I finally decoded the first complete fragment, and when the translation appeared on my screen, my fingers stopped over the keyboard and stayed there, suspended in air, for a time I can't measure. The fragment said 2 words: Yellow House. Just that. No context, no astronomical reference, no sense within any extraterrestrial communication model I could imagine. Yellow House. But the problem wasn't lack of sense. The problem was those 2 words meant something very specific to me. Because I grew up in a yellow house on Jacaranda Street, number 112, in Ribeirão Preto. A yellow house with white windows and a backyard where my mother cultivated mint in a cracked clay pot. It had to be coincidence. I said that to myself out loud, there inside that silent station, and my voice sounded weak and unconvincing, echoing off metal walls. It had to be coincidence. But I decoded more. Couldn't stop. Each new fragment I extracted from those patterns was like ripping a bandage from a wound I didn't know I had. Red bicycle. The one I got for my birthday when I turned 7. The one I left in the rain all night and my father got angry at me for the first and only time I remember. Formula 1, Sunday. My grandfather. The 2 of us sitting on the transparent plastic sofa in his living room, watching Senna on the old television that hissed in the highs. The smell of freshly brewed coffee coming from the kitchen, while the car engine roared on screen and my grandfather squeezed my shoulder each time Senna passed someone. First time in ocean, saltwater, Guarujá. I was 5. The first time I entered the ocean and swallowed that salt water and started crying from shock, not understanding why water had taste. My mother picked me up, lifted me above the waves and said the ocean was testing me, just to see if I was brave enough to come back. The symbols carved in the asteroid belt weren't an alien message. They were memories. My memories. I stopped mapping and stayed there, motionless, looking at the space on screen where GR823 had been until 20 minutes ago. An asteroid 180 meters across that I had just scanned, and that was now just another black hole in my data. Another empty space that, combined with all the others, formed the outline of a word I still hadn't been able to decode. And for the first time in 11 days, I asked the question I should have asked from the beginning. Not, what's happening with the asteroids, but what's happening with me? I stood up slowly from the workstation and looked around the cabin as if for the first time. 4 meters by 6, maybe a little less. Everything apparently in its usual place. Navigation console on the left, scanning monitor on center wall, analysis station on the right, modular bed against the far corner, and the observation window in back, showing the asteroid field outside, each rock illuminated by the distant and pale light of the sun. I walked to the window and touched the glass with my fingertips. It was cold, as it always had been. I went to the console and ran my hand over the surface. Smooth metal, familiar, worn at the points where my elbows rest during long sessions. I sat on the bed and felt the firm foam receiving me. The same sensation of every previous night. But when I tried to remember how I'd gotten there, when I tried to access the memory of launch, of journey to the belt, of station's initial configuration, I found nothing. It wasn't like forgetting something you know happened, when the memory's outline is still there, even if details have faded. It was like looking for a door in a hallway, and discovering the hallway simply ends in a smooth, unmarked wall. The memory hadn't faded, it had never existed. There was no launch, no journey, no arrival. There was only the work, the mapping, the asteroids on screen, and the asteroids were disappearing. I sent a third message to Meridian. This time I didn't write a report, didn't send data, didn't ask for pattern analysis. I sent just a question, 4 words in the middle of a blank screen. Where am I? The response came in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Not 14 hours like the first time. Not 22 hours like the second. 6 minutes, as if someone was sitting on the other side of that communication channel, awake, watching, with the response already typed and finger hovering over the send button, waiting for the exact moment I finally asked. Danilo, you're at Meridian Mapping Station, Delta Sector. Everything is fine. Dr. Renata can talk right now if you want. 6 minutes. The communication distance that justified delays of 14 hours or more. Answered in 6 minutes, as if it were a text message between 2 people in the same city. Or there was no distance between us at all. Or there never was. I returned to console, but this time not to map. It was to look. Really look. Without the filter of routine. Without the comfortable anesthesia of repetitive work. The asteroid field in the observation window was beautiful. Always had been beautiful. And I'd always loved that view. Rocks of all shapes and sizes slowly rotating in infinite darkness, each illuminated by weak and yellowish light from distant sun, each carrying its geological history of billions of years in silence. It was because of that beauty I'd chosen this profession back then, when I was still young enough to think cataloging the cosmos was a way of embracing it. But now, looking with eyes that no longer wanted to be deceived, I noticed something I should have noticed on day 1. The asteroids didn't cast shadows on each other. The sunlight clearly came from a specific direction, I could identify the light source in the window's corner, but the rocks were illuminated perfectly uniformly, without any shadow, without any dark face, without any play of light and darkness that any solid body in space should have, like objects floating in a computer rendering, like images on a screen. I placed my hand on the observation window for the second time that night. I felt the materials cold against my palm, and I realized, with a clarity that cut me inside, that in 11 days of supposed mission, I'd never tried to open that window. Never thought to verify if it was a real window, with vacuum on the other side, or if it was simply a projection screen mounted on my room's wall. I closed my hand and knocked on the glass with my knuckles. The sound that came back wasn't glass sound. I should have panicked at that moment. I think any normal person would have. But something inside me already knew the truth. Maybe had known for days. Maybe my whole body had already understood what my mind refused to process, and that's why panic simply didn't come. Or maybe panic required a type of energy I no longer had available, as if the tank had dried up without me noticing. I sat on the cabin floor, leaned my back against the wall, and stayed there looking around with eyes that finally wanted to see. 4 meters by 6. Too small to be a functional space station. Too large to be... To be what? I looked at each object around me and tried to see it as something else. Tried to peel away the mapping station layer and find what was underneath. The navigation console was too narrow, with rounded edges and smooth to touch, as if designed so nobody would hurt themselves on it. The scanning monitor was fixed to the wall, slightly tilted downward, positioned at exact eye level when I was sitting in the chair. The chair had no wheels. It had floor locks. And the modular bed, that bed where I slept every night since arriving, was low. Lower than any space station bed I'd ever seen, and on the sides, it had retractable rails I could raise and lower. Side rails. What kind of deep space mapping station has a bed with side rails? I decoded one more fragment that night. Worked with strange calm, methodical, as if urgency had evaporated all at once, and what remained was just the surgical precision of someone who accepts they're doing the last important thing they'll do in life. The fragment was long. Longer than the others, more complex, built with more asteroids removed than any previous symbol. And when decoding finished, and words formed on screen, I read them silently 3 times in a row before I could release the air trapped in my chest. Danilo Ferraz, 46 years old. Diagnosis confirmed March 12th. Accelerated neurocognitive degeneration, Kreutzmann variant. Prognosis: total loss of cognitive function in approximately 3 weeks from start of containment protocol. No available treatment. No known reversal. It wasn't a message written in asteroids by alien intelligence. It was my medical record. The asteroids had never been asteroids. They were memory clusters, groupings of neural activity that the mapping system, the brain monitoring system, registered and presented to me in a visual interface while they still existed inside my head. And each time I scanned one of these bodies, each time I pointed my instruments and pressed the cataloging button, what I was really doing was accessing that memory one last time, touching it for the last time, before the disease consumed it for good. I wasn't cataloging an asteroid belt in deep space. I was sitting in a hospital room, watching my own mind disappear before my eyes, piece by piece, memory by memory, rock by rock. Dr. Renata appeared the next morning. Not on a communication screen like I expected, not as a transmission crossing millions of kilometers of void. She appeared in person, opened the door to my cabin that I'd always treated as a pressurized space station airlock, and entered carrying a kind smile and a glass of water with steady hand. She was a woman in her 50s, maybe a little more, with gray hair tied in a simple bun and a white coat that had the naturalness of someone who wears coats every day for decades. And behind her, through the open door, I saw a hallway. Not the metallic and functional structure of a space station. Not exposed pipes or control panels on walls. A hospital hallway. Bright walls painted warm beige, fluorescent lights on ceiling. Vinyl floor reflecting everything in a blurred way. And that smell, that unmistakable smell of disinfectant, mixed with something sweet I couldn't identify, but my body recognized before my mind could process. "How's the mapping today, Danilo?" She said that with such complete naturalness that for a second I thought I'd imagined everything. The hallway, the coat, the hospital smell. There was no irony in her voice, no condescension, no performative pity. It was the genuine and simple question of someone who knew exactly what was happening and who had decided, consciously and with all the weight of that choice, to let me work. "The asteroids are disappearing," I said, and my voice came out lower than I intended. "I know." She pulled a plastic chair I'd never noticed in the room's corner and sat in front of me, close enough that I could see details of her face, wrinkles around eyes, the way she tilted her head slightly to the side when listening. "Do you want to talk about what you discovered?" "I know what they are." She didn't react. Didn't widen eyes, didn't look away to some safe point on wall, didn't try to distract me with another question or change subject. Stayed there, present, whole, with hands crossed on lap, waiting for me to continue in my own time. "They're my memories," I said. "The asteroids are my memories. And they're vanishing because I tried to find the word, the exact word that described what was happening with my mind. The word I'd used hundreds of times throughout life in banal conversations, and that now, right now, when I needed it most, it wasn't there. The word had disappeared. It was there a second ago, I was sure. I knew that word. And now in its place there was only mute void. A blank space in my head where an important thing used to live. Like one more asteroid that vanished from the map. Dr. Renata extended her hand and placed it over mine, with a gentle firmness that anchored me there in that moment. "You don't need to finish the sentence, Danilo." She explained everything to me, with patience, with a delicacy that deep down hurt more than any brutality would have hurt, because brutality at least would have the decency to be quick. The Kreutzmann variant is rare and aggressive. Unlike other forms of dementia, it doesn't start by corroding recent memories like most people imagine when thinking about this type of disease. It starts with connections. The neural pathways that link one memory to another. The invisible threads that transform a pile of loose memories into a coherent story called life. These pathways dissolve first. Each memory becomes isolated from others, like an island losing its bridges one by one. Then, when bridges run out and each memory is already alone in darkness, islands start to sink. Slowly at first, so slow you barely notice. And then cascading, like dominoes falling one after another without stopping. The mapping system I used every day was real, in a way. Or rather, it was an interface carefully designed by the hospital's neurology team to transform my brain scans into something I could understand and interact with intuitively, using skills I'd cultivated throughout a lifetime. Each asteroid on my map corresponded to a neural cluster still active inside my brain. Each scan I did was, in reality, a functional magnetic resonance session, translated in real time to spatial cartography language, and each asteroid that disappeared from my screen after being scanned. "How much time do I have?" I asked, interrupting her explanation in the middle because suddenly medical details didn't matter anymore. "The team's projections indicate about 3 weeks from protocol start. You're on the 11th day. 10 days. I had 10 days of myself. 10 days before the last asteroid vanished and screen went dark and I no longer knew who Danilo Ferraz was. And why did you let me believe I was in space?" Dr. Renata took a deep breath before answering. And in that sigh, I heard the weight of a decision that clearly hadn't been easy for anyone. Because in the first week, before protocol, when we still tried to explain the situation directly, You panicked every time. And the problem is, each time you slept, the disease erased the previous explanation. So every morning when you woke up, we had to tell everything again. And every morning the reaction was the same horror, the same despair, the same absolute panic of someone discovering for the first time they're losing everything. Some afternoons too, when a stronger episode erased what you'd processed in the morning. So the team designed the mapping interface as alternative, something that used your real skills, that gave purpose and structure to what you were experiencing, that allowed you to... That allowed what? That allowed you to work, Danilo, instead of suffering the same devastating news every morning. I stayed silent for a long time after that. Dr. Renata didn't move, didn't look at watch, didn't try to fill void with words. Stayed there sitting, hands still crossed on lap, breathing at the same calm rhythm as before. From the hallway, through the door she'd left ajar, came sounds I'd never heard before, or that maybe I'd heard all along without noticing. Sounds my collapsing brain had reinterpreted as ventilation noise and life support systems of a space station. Soft steps of rubber shoes on vinyl. Distant and muffled voices of people talking somewhere beyond my field of vision. The regular and patient beep of a heart monitor in some room near mine, marking time with mechanical precision of someone who doesn't care what that time means to whoever's living it. The patterns I found in the asteroids, I finally said, and my voice came out hoarse as if I hadn't spoken in days. The messages I decoded in the spaces between them. Yes, I wrote them, didn't I? She nodded slowly, with a small head movement that confirmed what I already knew, but that still weighed like a sentence. In the first days, before the team developed mapping protocol, you spent hours trying to leave messages for yourself. Notes stuck to bathroom mirror, audio recordings on phone, lists written on back of medical prescriptions. You knew what was happening. At that moment you still knew, and tried desperately to preserve what you could before disease took it. The team decided to incorporate these messages into map interface. The idea was that, if you found them naturally during mapping work, they might make sense in a way direct explanations no longer did. I had written my own medical record in code and hidden it in the asteroid map. Had encoded memories of my childhood in empty spaces between remaining rocks. Had left breadcrumbs scattered through a labyrinth I myself was erasing as I walked through it. And the yellow house? The red bicycle? The taste of salt in ocean? You put everything in there, Danilo. Everything that was important to you. Every memory you couldn't accept losing. I was afraid of forgetting. You are afraid of forgetting. Present tense. Because it was still happening. Because it hadn't stopped and wouldn't stop. I asked to see the real map. Not the version with asteroids and belts and alphanumeric designations, not the beautiful interface they'd built for me as a farewell gift. The real map. The brain scan showing areas that still functioned and areas where there was nothing anymore. Dr. Renata hesitated for the first time since entering the room. Until that moment she'd been a rock, unshakable, present. But in that instant I saw something move behind her eyes. Something she tried to hold and couldn't entirely. Danilo. I have the right to see what's happening inside my own head. She stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded and stood up to work the console, the room's computer, and projected the image on wall screen. The same screen where I saw the asteroid belt every morning. But now it showed something else. A human brain. My brain. Seen from above, in translucent layers overlapping like slices of light. There were luminous areas, pulsing with weak but stubborn electrical activity, like embers refusing to go out. And there were vast, dark regions around them, entire territories of neural tissue where activity had completely ceased, and that were now just dead landscape inside my head. The dark areas were significantly larger than bright ones, much larger. Looking at that image was like looking at a map of a continent after catastrophic flood, where only highest mountain peaks still appeared above water. And in the remaining bright areas, in islands still resisting, I saw the pattern. The same organic symbols, the same fractal curves I'd decoded in asteroid map. Because it was the same map. It had always been exactly the same map. But there was one symbol I still hadn't been able to decode. A large and complex symbol spreading through last active regions of my cortex like a root gripping Earth. It was the largest of all patterns, what required more active asteroids for its shape to be visible, what occupied map edges, areas I hadn't scanned yet. "What does this symbol say?" I asked, pointing at screen with finger. Dr. Renata looked at where I pointed, and I saw something change in her face in a way I couldn't ignore. It wasn't pity, wasn't the professional and calculated sadness of someone dealing with terminal patients every day. It was something rawer, more exposed, something she as a doctor probably shouldn't demonstrate, but as a human being couldn't hide. It says, "I was here." 3 words, the last symbol, the last message I'd prepared for myself before starting to disappear. Before First Bridge dissolved and First Island started to sink. I was here. Not remember me. Not save me. Not fight for me. Not find a cure. I was here, as if I already knew, back at the beginning, when lucidity was still solid enough to carry that weight, that there would be no rescue, that there would be no cure, no miracle, no last-minute turnaround. That memories would leave one by one, like asteroids vanishing from map, and at some point I wouldn't know my own name anymore, wouldn't recognize my mother's face in a photograph, wouldn't remember taste of salt in my mouth for first time, or sound of Formula One engine on my grandfather's television. And that the only thing I could do, the only thing still within my reach, was to engrave that phrase in the last piece of me that would survive. Not for someone outside to find, but so the last conscious version of Danilo Ferraz would know, even if for a single fleeting second, that he had existed, that he had been real, that all of it, the yellow house, the bicycle in rain, Guaruha ocean, grandfather's coffee, 18 years cataloging stars and rocks and void, that all of it had really happened. Dr. Renata left after almost an hour. Said she'd return in the morning, that I could continue mapping if I wanted or simply rest, and that the choice was entirely mine. She squeezed my hand before leaving, and her hand was warm, and that warmth stayed on my skin for a while after she left. I stayed alone in the room, sat in front of console and looked at screen, which had gone back to showing asteroid belt instead of my brain, as if system knew the lucidity window was already closing and wanted to return me to the only place where I still made sense. Rocks spinning in dark. Beautiful. Familiar. Each with its alphanumeric designation, its calculated orbit, its mineral composition cataloged with obsessive precision of a man who dedicated entire life to giving names to things that float in void. Each of them, a part of me that still existed. I opened the notebook where I handwrote designations and turned pages slowly. Dozens of names in there, hundreds maybe, all written in my handwriting, firm and secure on first pages, when notebook was new and belt was vast, and shaky, uncertain, almost illegible in last entries, as if the handwriting was forgetting how to hold pen. And I realized with a sadness so great it didn't fit inside any emotion I knew, that I no longer remembered what some of those names meant. GR774, for example. I knew it had been important. The first to disappear. What had started all this? But what was that memory? What had I lived? What had I felt? What had I been in the moment that asteroid represented? I didn't know anymore. The asteroid had vanished from map, and memory of what it held inside itself had gone with it. Today is the 12th day. I woke up and turned on mapping system like I do every morning because that's how my days begin, and I wouldn't know how to begin any other way. The asteroid field on screen seemed smaller than yesterday, darker, emptier. There are fewer rocks there than I remember seeing when I arrived, and the ones that remain have a strange glow I can't explain, a silent urgency, as if each one knew it might be next to vanish. I'll keep mapping. Not because I think I can save anything. Not because I think asteroids will stop disappearing if I do my job right, but because it's what I know how to do. It's what remains of me when everything else is dissolving. The ability, the routine, the mechanical and humble comfort of scanning a point in dark, recording what I find, cataloging one more fragment of universe before it's lost forever. And maybe when last asteroid vanishes from my screen and nothing remains but darkness, and I no longer know who I am, or where I am, or why I'm sitting in front of empty screen in room I don't recognize, surrounded by bright walls and disinfectant smell and soft beeps from machines I don't understand. Maybe somewhere in void, engraved in space between all things that disappeared, the three words will still be there. Invisible to everyone, invisible even to me, but existing anyway, stubborn, refusing to vanish along with the rest. I was here. There's a new asteroid on scanner this morning. I've never seen this one before, I'm almost sure, although lately my certainty isn't worth much. It's a small and irregular body with weak and pulsing glow that reminds me of a heart beating slowly in dark. System assigned designation LM001 automatically, and I don't know why, but I really want to scan this asteroid. I feel it's important. I feel, somewhere deep inside me, that words don't reach, that I need to know what's inside it before it disappears like all the others. I start scan and watch data fill screen slowly. How strange. Asteroid LM001 has a composition I've never seen before in 18 years of career, and that makes no sense to me. It's not rock, not metal, not ice. Scanner insists material is organic, which shouldn't be possible, because asteroids simply aren't made of organic matter. But data is there in front of me, and it's clear. Living tissue, rhythmic electrical pulses, complex and intertwined internal structure branching in millions of directions at once. And that seems, that actually seems like a neural network. But what a curious thing. I'll note this in notebook and move forward with mapping because there's still a lot to catalog in this belt and work doesn't wait. Meridian will want complete reports when mission ends, and I intend to deliver everything properly. I've always been good at this. Methodical, patient, careful. This is my job, and I'm proud of it. I don't know how long I've been at this station, to be honest, because loneliness and silence of this place make time dissolve in funny way. But I know I have work to do, and that someone has to do it. Someone has to map what's out there, name what floats in dark before it's lost forever. I'm that someone. Oh wait, there's a note here in notebook I don't remember making. It's on one of first pages, in handwriting that looks like mine but firmer, more secure, more present than my handwriting is now. As if person who wrote these words was more whole than I am at this moment. As if they knew things I no longer know, and had left this here for me to find. The note says, "When you read this, please remember, the house was yellow and was on Jacaranda Street. The bicycle was red and you left it in rain. Ocean tasted like salt and Mom said you were brave. Grandpa's coffee brewed fresh. Senna on television. You were loved, Danilo. You were very loved." I don't know what this means. I don't know who Danilo is, but for some reason I can't explain. For some reason that comes from a place so deep inside me that words don't exist there. I'm crying.